Hi everyone, my name is Gehna. I am currently teaching the Scratch Junior course with AI000 Learning, and I've been doing so for the past year. And this is going to be a quick information session about teaching with AI000 Learning and teaching specifically the Scratch Junior course. And yeah, I'm just going to be sharing some of the tips and tricks that I've learned and that maybe can help you. So with that, let's get started, and I hope this helps. So let me quickly just share my screen. Okay. So as a quick introduction, you probably already know this if you want to teach Scratch Junior, but Scratch Junior is a programming language that is designed for younger students, so students who are from 5 to 7 years old. And it is essentially an easier version of the very popular programming language Scratch. And the most significant difference between the two that you really should know is that although you can access Scratch on the web page, you can't access Scratch Junior online. You need to download it as an application. And the steps for how to download Scratch Junior onto your own desktop all of the steps are on ThinkLand. I will go through where you can find that in a few minutes, but that's just something important to know, that Scratch Junior, you cannot access it online as a web page on your desktop. You will need to download it as an application, and your students will need to download it on the tablets or iPads as well. We will cover this though in a few minutes, but that's something that I just want to put out there. Now, teaching with AI000 Learning. So I'm going to keep this short because there are multiple videos, I think, on the teaching process with AI000 Learning specifically. But the overall gist of it is that when you're assigned a class, you will probably receive an email from ThinkLand, and it will tell you the time of the class, who your students are, what the Zoom link is. And you will be teaching basically students who are aged from 5 to 7 years old a 1-hour coding class every week. You will be provided with the curriculum and the pacing for the class on ThinkLand. ThinkLand is, I think, the main platform that you really need to know about, because that is where all management of classes happens. And that's also going to be where you write your evaluations and reports for all your classes. So that's something important to know as well. We're going to cover the curriculum and the pacing specifically for Scratch Junior in the next slide. So I'll talk about that a little more, but it's just important to know that this is going to be the process you follow when teaching with AI000 Learning. And it's important that you know about ThinkLand as well. I'm guessing you already have an account with them already though. So that's good. So the lesson plan for Scratch Junior. So the curriculum and the lesson plan, so the lesson plan meaning the class pacing and what activities you should be doing when, are all provided on ThinkLand, and I'm going to be visiting the ThinkLand platform in a second. I just want to, add a disclaimer that the recommended time that is on this class pacing is like an estimate, and it doesn't have to be. If you go over or if you finish before, that's completely okay. It's just a recommendation. Don't rush yourself or don't go too slowly if you're, if you're not following the pacing. But do take it as an overall indicator of where you're supposed to be at in your teaching and class time. So here, let me quickly go through where you can find this. So on the ThinkLand platform, so that's signing into ThinkLand. My ThinkLand looks like this. On the left here, you can see that I have the Scratch Junior link right there. If I click on Scratch Junior, let's let it load, you're going to see a bunch of links. All of these are very important. They're going to be very helpful when you're going through your classes and teaching. So I would definitely look at what each of them are and open them up. But the most important things that you should be using all the time, and I look at this before every class, is this document. So it's a class pacing document. So let me quickly click on that. And let's just let it load over there. And here's also the Scratch Junior setup document. So the class pacing document, as I've already mentioned, it just basically tells you what to do and when to do it. So it gives you like a roundabout time, so 30 minutes or 1 hour, what you should be spending on an activity in Scratch. So here it is. So as we can see, the first activity you'll be doing with your students is throw a dance party. That's the name of the coding activity that you'll be doing, and the estimated time to complete this activity is about 30 minutes. And then these two activities are the next ones you'll be doing, and the estimated time for this is 30 minutes, and it goes on. So it gives you a very step-by-step detailed lesson plan for each lesson. It's very useful, and I always look at this before I start any of my lessons to remind myself of what I'm supposed to be doing. And it goes on, and then it tells you exactly what the total number of hours for each one is. So session 1 would basically be everything, all of these tables above the bolded line. So for your first 16 hours of teaching, you should be, finishing all of this. And yeah, so this is very useful. And then this is session 2, the second table right here. So you should always know this. Now you might be wondering, what is Throw a Dance Party? What activity is that? So all the activities for Scratch Junior, I don't think this link is on ThinkPlan just yet, but I'm going to tell you what it is all the codes for activities are provided on the official Scratch Junior book. So you can put this into Google and just type the official Scratch Junior book PDF, and you should be able to find this. But this is also a link that I have. So if you do want this book and you can't find it online, feel free to contact me. I'm going to leave my contact details at the right end of the presentation so you know them, but I can then share this book with you. Now, this book basically tells you what each Throw a Dance Party, I believe. So here on this book, it will show you exactly what activity. So if we just scroll a little bit, there you go, official book. Okay, so here it's showing you all the little sections. So chapter 1, to our class pacing, you can see that unit 1 is getting started. So basically, we've taken just the exact codes from this book and put it into the lesson plan. So activity 1, let's see here. Activity 1, make your cat move is right there. Chapter 2 animations on page 28, and it'll show you the exact code for it. So 8, round about there. Let's let it load for a second. Okay, so this is make your cat move. So the first activity you're going to be doing with your students, and here is the code for it. So it tells you the exact code for it. This is going to be the code for it right here. And it even explains what that is going to be, very useful for you. You have, like, I looked at it every single lesson, and it basically just tells you exactly what you're supposed to do in every lesson, and it tells you the code for it. So it's amazing. So this book is very useful. So to summarize that section up is that on ThinkPlan, you can find your class pacing, which will tell you every activity and the time you're supposed to take to do it. And to actually find the code for the activities, you have to go to the official Scratch Junior book, which is not on ThinkPlan yet. I think we are putting it on ThinkPlan soon, hopefully, but you can search it up on Google or contact me for a copy. So that is about the lesson plan and how to get the codes. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was that there's also a document on ThinkPlan that shows you how to set up Scratch Junior. So you can also send this to the kids' parents, to your students' parents, because they will need to set up Scratch Junior on their kids' tablet or iPad. So it goes step by step. It tells the parents how to download it on their tablet. But for you, because you're going to be teaching them with your computer, you should download it on your computer. So you have to go to this website and download it and follow steps on this. So ThinkPlan is very great. It tells you class pacing, it tells you the setup document. So definitely go and check ThinkPlan out for any of the information that you need on Scratch Junior and just setting it up in the basics. That will be a lifesaver. So that is about the lesson plan. Now, I'm going to be going through some tips and tricks that I've learned that hopefully might be useful for you too. Yeah, I've taught Scratch Junior, so these are some of the things that I picked up, which might be very useful for you to consider as well when teaching a class. My first tip these are tips for the very first lesson that you're going to be teaching the very first class with your students. The first one is email parents of all students before class starts. Now, this is very important. I emailed the parents of the students before my first lesson as well. And there are 2 reasons why this is very important. The first one is that they get to know you better. So I kind of included some of my hobbies. I told them how long I've been coding and why I like coding and that I'm really excited to teach this class. So I told them a little bit about myself. So it just creates, trust between you and the parents of the students. And it's great that they get to know you a little bit better before you start teaching their children. But the second reason why this is very important is because you should ask the parents to download Scratch Junior onto their kids' tablet before the first lesson. So I gave them the link to download it on the Play Store and the App Store, and just asked them to download it on the tablet or the iPad of the students, and so that we could start class on the first lesson without there being a hassle of if they have Scratch Junior or not. The reason I say tablet and not desktop is because I think it's the most useful if all the students have Scratch Junior on their tablet, because they can just show it to you on their screen. So they have Zoom on their computer and they have Scratch Junior on their tablet, and then they can just show you the code directly like that. You don't have to share screens and figure out how that works, because it's much harder for 5 to 7-year-olds to figure out how to share the screen on Zoom and to figure out how to use the keypad so that they can actually code online. So I definitely would suggest that ask the parents to download Scratch Junior on the iPad or tablet and not on a desktop, because that is much harder for younger students. So always have them on a tablet so that they can easily show you their screen when they're done with the code, and have Zoom on their computer instead. So that's another important thing to remember. The third thing, now this is, I can't stress this enough, is to plan a fun introduction lesson with the kids. It's okay if this takes 20 minutes in the beginning of class in the first lesson, or 30 minutes. It's just very important to have an introduction lesson with them. Let them know about, let them know things about yourself and ask them things about them. So I started my Scratch Junior lesson by asking them their favorite foods. I remember their hobbies. I told them about my hobbies, and we just had a conversation, and it's very important because, first of all, it breaks the ice, and not only that, is that, again, it develops trust between you and them, so they're not scared to ask you questions later on. And it's just amazing to also know your students, because they're all wonderful. They're all wonderful kids. So I would definitely say plan a fun introduction lesson. Whatever that is, whatever you want to do, that's completely fine, but ask them questions, let them know a little bit about yourself, not just as a teacher, but as a person, so that they actually like you. So I would say planning a fun introduction lesson is very important. So that is definitely one of my big tips. Next, I would introduce the basic concept of coding. Now, what happens is, like, when the kids come to your class, they sometimes don't know what they're doing. And, just saying, okay, this is Scratch Junior, let's learn how to put blocks on a screen, can get them very confused. So I would definitely introduce what it actually is, but because they're 5 to 7 years old, it's hard to introduce it in a very complex way. So the way I introduced coding was, I said that coding is a language, and then I asked them which languages they spoke. So I was like, okay, what language do you guys speak? Well, coding is a language like English and like French and like Hindi, but instead of interacting between humans, you're interacting with the computer, you're talking to the computer. So it's a language, and it's used to talk to the computer. And the language we're going to be learning in this case is Scratch Junior. That's the name of it. And that's my very basic way of explaining coding. And it helped, it gave them an overall idea of what it is and what we're going to be doing. So I would suggest trying to find a basic way you can actually introduce it. You can use this, but if you have something better, that's perfectly, that's great too. But just, trying to give them an idea of what they're actually going to be doing. And so they're not just, going on this random map they have no idea about, and putting random blocks on the screen. So that's how I introduced the general concept of coding to them. Obviously, it's not perfect. I really made it as basic as I could, so for the students, but I would definitely suggest doing something of the sort for the first lesson. And quick note on that previous what I just said, I also reinforced that every lesson. So I was like, okay, can anyone remind me what coding is, or what is Scratch Junior? So that they kept thinking about it. They kept having a goal in mind, or they kept having like a basic understanding of what we were actually doing in the class, so that they weren't lost at what even is Scratch Junior. So I would definitely have a basic sort of introduction to coding for them. Part 2 for tips for the first lesson, start with something small. So I know in the evaluation, you were supposed to explain the whole platform of Scratch Junior. I definitely wouldn't suggest that you do that. I would say, like, really just show them the basic of Scratch Junior, so that they can do something and then build upon it every lesson. So definitely tell them where you can see the code, how to start the code, where to write the code, like what section is to write the code, and then some of the blocks, explain some of the blocks, but don't explain all of them, I wouldn't say. So start with something very small, and make sure they're understanding, because teaching them everything will make them forget it in like less than 5 seconds. So I would definitely say start small and then build upon that. Next thing would be try to make it as interactive as possible. So this is very important. First of all, we're online, so we they can be distracted very easily because we're not actually with them in person. So you really need to make your session as interactive as you possibly can. And the way to do this is to, first of all, divide your activity into parts. So let's say you have your make your cat move activity, which is the first activity you're supposed to complete. Instead of doing it all on your desktop and then asking them to do it on theirs, divide it into parts. So make the first part adding a character. So add a character onto your screen, then ask them to add a character on their screen. Then check everyone has done it and everyone's fine with it, ask them to show their screens, then repeat. So then do the next part of the activity, which is maybe adding blocks to the code, whatever the code is, adding blocks to the code. So add blocks to the code, add some blocks to the code, make them add some blocks to the code. check, then repeat. So divide it into parts, because just talking to them and giving them, a sort of lecture and showing the whole activity in one go, that's not like, it won't be easy for them to understand and grasp the activity. So I would say divide it into parts, and then you do it, then make them do it, then check, then do it again. You do it, they do it, check. That's the best way to make it interactive, I think. And not only that, keep asking them questions. So don't just do it like by yourself. I would say keep asking them questions like, okay, how do you think I can make the character move? How do you think I can, if I want my character to reach the apple, how do you think I can do that? Which blocks can I use? What are the colors of the blocks? So all of that sort of like, all those sort of questions that will allow them to think while you're doing it on your desktop is very important. So that, again, this I can't stress enough, it's just to make it interactive, especially given their age and they're younger, they will tend to get distracted more easily, but so it's even more important to make it interactive. But generally as well, and just in teaching, it's always important to keep it interactive. So those are some of the ways I can do it, that I did it, but there are a lot of other ways I think that you can make a lesson interactive. Now, these are some general tips for teachers that I would use when teaching. Firstly is start the lesson by asking how they're doing, what they did in the week. So again, this is kind of building on my ice breaking session tip, but what I'm basically trying to say is that don't just go straight into coding every lesson. Get to know them, ask them questions about their lives, about what they like doing, and tell them about your week as well for a little bit. So like, don't be afraid to spend the first 5 minutes of class just talking about each other's weeks and hobbies or whatever it is, because getting to know them better will build so much like more trust, and they won't be intimidated by you, so they won't be scared to ask you a question when they do have one, and they won't be like scared to raise their hand or answer questions. I would definitely say it's so important to just ask them how they're doing, and in the beginning of every lesson, no matter what lesson it is, just take 5 minutes to always just talk and develop another like relationship with each of them. Because I mean, it's amazing to get to know them, but it's also amazing for you in terms of just teaching. So I would say that's definitely a great tip that you should follow. The second one on here is ask for cameras on. This is pretty obvious, I guess, because you'll be able to see what they're doing. So yeah, always have their camera on, I would say. Third is keep asking them questions. Again, building on what I was saying before, especially ask them if they do or they don't understand anything, something. So I always have a thumbs up, thumbs down system where I just say, so do you understand that? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or middle. So like students will go like this, depending on if they understand it or not. And it's just super easy and like doable. So that's just something I do. And even when I'm giving them an activity, so when I say, okay, please complete this activity, I'll give you 10 minutes. Does everyone understand what they have to do? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. And everyone, goes ahead and gives me a thumbs up or thumbs down. And then I go to the people who don't understand. So, keep on asking them questions and keep on making sure if they understand something or not. And you can use the thumbs up and thumbs down system as well, because it really works like well. They don't have to unmute as well, so they can just quickly do it. So that's something that I did and I would suggest too. Fourth is give the characters in your code a name. So I started off my first lesson of teaching Scratch Junior by giving them a character, the name Bob, and I always refer to him as Bob. So I always talk to that character as Bob, and I was always like, okay, so Bob needs to cross the road. How can we do that? What blocks can we use to make him cross the road? Can we move? So I always I made it a story. Basically, I tried as much as possible to make my code a story, which makes it more fun for them. And they also started referring to that character as Bob. So just giving the characters in your code a name or, a background just to make it fun and make it like a story is always useful. And I would always suggest doing that because it was very useful for me as well. Next is if you've given them a task for the lesson, make sure to keep checking up on them. So what I realized really quickly is that they will not tell you sometimes if they don't understand anything. So every time I'd given them a task, which was fairly long, like for 10 minutes, I was like, code this, please. I would always check up on each of them individually. So I wouldn't just ask them a group. I'd ask one student specifically, how are you doing? Can you show me what you're doing? And make them show them their screen, even if they're not done, just so I can see where they're at. So make sure you're individually asking every student how they're doing, because sometimes they won't ask you questions even if they want to. So it's very important that you take the initiative and not just wait for them to ask you questions. Last one on this slide is play Kahoot and other fun games. So Kahoot is a very fun platform. If you don't know about it, I would definitely search it up on Google to know a little bit about it. But it's basically a way to quiz other students, and it's a game. So like they get rankings on who answered the most questions correctly and fastest, and all that. So I would definitely play in Kahoots and other fun games to test their knowledge, because it's great to have on hand always. Like if you finished an activity early, you can just play a Kahoot with them, and they really enjoy Kahoots. So have fun games, have Kahoots, because it's a great way to test knowledge, and it's a great way to just keep their attention and do something fun. And I had multiple Scratch Junior Kahoots planned, so I just had them before class. If I ever needed them, I would use them. So that's another tip, to always have that on hand. Part 2 of the tips for teachers. Again, kind of repeating what I've already said, but don't make it a lecture. Explain the topics and keep asking them questions, while asking them to do little tasks as well. So they're always engaged, they're always listening to you, and they're not getting bored or saying, oh, she's talking for way too long. So try to make it as interactive as possible. Next is, if they're getting distracted, make the activity more fun by, again, making it a story, as I mentioned before, or let them design their own characters. So on Scratch Junior, there is a way that you can design your own character, and you can draw your own character out on your little, like on your tablet. Or this is very useful. I realized that a lot of students love doing that. So if they're getting bored, if you see they're obviously not really connecting with the activity and not wanting to do it, ask them to design their own character first. It's a very fun way to just let them do something which they might find fun. And if this doesn't work, always have a Kahoot at hand. As I've already said, Kahoots are amazing and they're very fun to play as well, but they also test knowledge. So it's a great way to, I think, just keep their attention. So always have Kahoots. When making games, so the third one here is, when making games, ask them to share their games with the whole class and then play them with each other. So a lot of the activities you're going to see, especially towards the end, is them making games. And it's amazing to have them share their games with each other, and share the games and play, like what they play each other's games as well. If it's something that can be played online, and that's very fun. And it was amazing. We did it, and all of them had a lot of fun, and it was just a great way to share projects with each other. And not only that, they also get to know their classmates better, and they get to connect with their classmates. So I found that it was a great way to just get to know each other better as a class, especially because they're online, they don't really talk to each other. They got to know each other better. It was great. So I would definitely share activities and share each other's projects with each other. Last thing on here is, ask the students to stay behind after class if they don't understand a concept. So if you see that someone is struggling, then just say, can you please stay behind, and try to explain it to them as much as possible. You're always going to have a class which has a variety of different levels of coding, and trying to give activities that challenge every student is hard. But if you see that someone is struggling, I would always just ask them to stay behind and explain the concept to them separately. Now, my next slide is on having class sizes. So having a class size of 1 student versus 3 students versus 5 students or more is very different. The way you handle your time, the way you handle the class is very different as well. My first thing is pretty obvious. Try to distribute your time so that everyone has, everyone is getting your attention, and everyone is like getting some of your advice, or you're looking at everyone the same amount as much as possible. The second one is, if you have a teaching assistant, make sure that you use their help. Ask them to take care of some groups of students while you do the others. This way you're more efficient. And my last point is, the larger the group you have, the more chances that you have a variety of coding levels. So that's I think the hardest thing to manage when you have a bigger size of class. So if you have a large group and you see that one of them is ahead of others, then always plan activities that will add on to the one you just did, such as adding another character in the code, or creating your own character, adding sound, changing the backdrop. Just have another extension activity for anyone who's finished before. And for people who are finished after, or who struggle a little bit more with the activity, make sure that you're asking them questions. So when they are coding, make sure you ask them how they're doing and you help them out when they need it. So, after the first few classes, you probably will know the level of all your students around, and the students that maybe understand concepts easier, then you can have these activities planned for them. And the students might struggle with something, make sure that you're asking them questions and understanding what they're like, what they know, what they don't know, as much as possible. And having a bigger class, sometimes it can also be harder to make sure, like, to see whether they're all actually paying attention or not. So what I would do is when I'm explaining an activity, I would ask them questions in order. So I would say, okay, well, I'm going to ask all of you questions on what I just explained now, and then go in order, like, please answer this question, please answer this. So that would keep their attention and everyone was participating, and I wasn't just waiting for someone to participate. I would kind of point them out. And that would also help me understand if they were, listening to me. So that's one way to manage that. But if you have a class size more than 5, I would suggest asking for a teaching assistant, because that can be a lot to handle, and I completely understand that as well. Okay, now this last slide is on an example class. So this is actually the one you're seeing on the right here, that's my first ever Scratch class that I taught. You can find this video, my whole Scratch Junior class, on YouTube. So this is what you can search up, AI000 Scratch Junior Lesson 1, and the channel is Think Line School. So if you just search this up on Google, so this, I think you should look at if you're maybe want to have some ideas. I mean, first of all, this is by no means a perfect teaching method or way, and also this was my very first class I've ever taught, so I'm very nervous in it as well. But if you want some ideas, or just want to see what an example class might look like, you can definitely check this out. One thing that I did was I had a presentation ready for the student. Let's see if it reaches to the presentation part. So here was my presentation, and basically on the presentation I had questions I wanted to ask them. I had my hobbies, so the third slide there is a picture with all my hobbies. I had like a guitar on there, I had theater on there, and I was just telling them about what the things there are that I like. The fourth slide was me talking about what coding actually is, and I talked about how coding is kind of like a language, so I was trying to explain the basics to them. And then afterwards, I was introducing Scratch, so I was talking about how Scratch Junior is the language we're going to be learning today. And finally, I introduced Bob, so that's Bob right there on the 6th slide. I don't know if you can see him, but I was trying to just show them that Bob is going to be the character we're going to help. So that was my way of making it a story, as I was talking about in my tips. So here, that's me talking about was coding. So yeah, that's just how I connected with them. I created the presentation and I had all of those steps in there, and I just presented that to them and talked to them while I was doing it. And if you do want to like see an example class, and again, by no means is this perfect at all, you can do the complete opposite if you would like to. But if you do want to see some ideas on how to like break the ice, what are some introduction activities, and how can you start a class, and how do you teach, or what if you do want to have some ideas on that, you can go ahead and search this up on YouTube. So that there it is, or contact me and I can give you the link as well to this lesson on YouTube. Now, finally, that is the end of the information/training session. This is my Discord. Please feel free to contact me anytime if you need the PDF for the Scratch Junior book, or if you need anything else, if you're having trouble with writing reports or evaluations, or finding ThinkLand and how it works, or finding specific links, or just in teaching, you need some advice on like maybe you're having difficulty with other students. I probably won't know all the answers, but I can definitely direct you to someone who does know the answers, and I will make sure I can help you as much as I can. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me on my Discord. And yeah, I hope that was a little bit useful, and that there were some tips you could use in there. And yeah, I want to just wish you good luck on your teaching journey, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.